If you want to memorize Romanticism, it's fairly easy to divide it into generations. So we've examined the first generation with Coleridge and Wordsworth. Now comes the second generation with the Holy Trinity of Byron, Shelley, and Keats. Born with a club foot, but also stunning good looks, you have a portrait here by Richard Westall that is perhaps a bit too flattering, but still he was a very handsome man. George Gordon Byron, Lord Byron, became the international icon of Romanticism. His life, which reads like a novel, his unforgettable wit and humour, his colourful love life, his swimming across the Dardanelles, his flowing shirts and Venetian palace, his death in Missolonghi fighting for Greek independence, his memoirs so flamboyant they had to burn the manuscript, his immortal description by Lady Caroline Lamb as, quote, mad, bad, and dangerous to know. Oh, well, you name it. Lord B was everything romantic. Yet the poetry behind the icon also deserves real attention. Very briefly surveyed, let us say the cantos of Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, narrating his first grand tour of the Mediterranean from Portugal to Greece, in Spenserian stanzas made him instantly famous. And another long poem of 17 cantos in Ottava Rima, Don Juan or Don Juan, the longest comedy ramblings ever written, closed his production with final posthumous publication in 1825. So he started, let's say, with Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, and he ended with Don Juan. Okay. In between was a life of voluntary exile from 1816 onwards, with plenty of manuscripts sent by post or friends for publication in England, followed by avid translations everywhere from Paris to Warsaw. This production included verse plays and romantic tales of adventure, passion, and inner trouble intertwined. Some might say this was prose, centered on a fatal, dark, and indeed Byronic hero. The adjective has remained in the language. The three most famous of which are the Jaya, 1813, the Corsair, 1814, and Manfred, 1817. 1813, 1814, 1817. The Jaya, the Corsair, and Manfred. Likewise, from the upper classes, son of a baronet, Percy Bysshe Shelley was an exceptional character. Angelic-looking, and yet expelled from Oxford in 1811 for a pamphlet on the necessity of atheism. Well, you can imagine how that went down with the university authorities in Oxford. He was expelled. Having married against family wishes, Shelley travelled to the lakes, of course. He met Southey, and via his recommendation, William Godwin. The trouble is, he fell in love with Mary Godwin and eloped with her, together with another Godwin daughter, Claire Clairmont, thus deserting his pregnant wife. In 1816, the trio left England for Switzerland, where they met Lord Byron on the shores of Lake Geneva. Byron had a fling with Claire, resulting in the birth of his daughter, Allegra. Mary Shelley also had the original idea for her Frankenstein, or Frankenstein in proper German pronunciation. We will, of course, mention the book below. So, as you can see, both Byron and Shelley led a pretty, well, free sort of life. And, of course, that was, in those days, completely unacceptable. So he too, Shelley too, had to leave England for good, just like Byron, in 1818. Shelley and his new wife, Mary Shelley, went to Italy, where, like Byron himself, whom they often consorted with, where they led a wandering life for several years. They went from Florence to Rome to Naples until Shelley met a perfectly Shelleyan death, navigating his own boat, Ariel, into a storm in the Bay of La Spezia in 1822. So he too died young. Byron died in 24. Shelley died in 22, and Keats died in 21. You see, they all died very young. Again, typically romantic. Shelley's poetry oscillates between visionary long pieces defending political freedom, rebelling against an oppressive god, and going all the way to anarchy, for instance in the verse of his tragedy Prometheus Unbound. But also wonderful lyrics, where his intense sensitivity seems to contradict the loud proclamations. Triumph is obtained when the two trends meet and become reconciled. I think this is the case with his early poem Lastor, or shorter pieces like Ozymandias, or the famous Ode to the West Wind, or To a Scar-like, or Music When Soft Voices Die, etc. He also wrote a very powerful verse drama based on an Italian 16th century chronicle, the Cenci, in 1819. But maybe we should have a look at a few excerpts before we move on to examine John Keats. The last one I would like to examine is the other Shelley, not the Shelley with his great proclamations of great ideas, because of course I'm sure you understood the wild west wind will end up as a metaphor for human aspirations for freedom and total rejection of fetters. No, it's the other Shelley here, with this one, stanzas written in dejection near Naples. This is Shelley during his travels on a beach near Naples, having a moment of melancholy. And there you have the intimate Shelley. It's completely different. The sun is warm, the sky is clear, the waves are dancing fast and bright. Blue isles and snowy mountains wear the purple noon's transparent might. You see, he is on the beach listening to the wave, and you can almost see those waves, hear those waves. Listen to the end. The winds, the birds, the ocean floods, the city's voice itself is soft, like solitude's. I see the deep's untrampled floor, with green and purple seaweeds strown. I see the waves upon the shore, like light dissolved in star showers, thrown. I sit upon the sands alone. The lightning of the noontide ocean is flashing round me, and a tone arises from its measured motion. How sweet! Did any heart now share in my emotion? Alas, I have no hope, nor health, nor peace within, nor calm around, nor that content surpassing wealth, the sage in meditation found, and walked with inward glory crowned. Nor fame, nor power, nor love, nor leisure, others I see whom these surround. Smiling they live, and call life pleasure. To me that cup has been dealt in another measure. Yet now despair itself is mild, even as the winds and waters are. I could lie down like a tired child, and weep away the life of care, which I have borne and yet must bear, till death like sleep might steal on me, and I might feel in the warm air my cheek grow cold, and hear the sea breathe on my dying brain its last monotony. Oh well, I'm sure you can easily, even if you're not a sort of in the romantic cast of mind, I think you can get in tune pretty easily with the wonderful verse translating this wonderful sensitive melancholy. Last but not least in the Holy Trinity comes John Keats. He too died young, and he too in Italy, where he had travelled to try and cure his tuberculosis, what they used to call in those days consumption. From very humble origins, Keats was a devourer of books from childhood onwards. And after pharmacy studies at Guy's Hospital in London, he decided to dedicate his life, despite very meagre resources, to the writing of poetry. Though friends managed to get him to contact an important publicist in those days, journalist and even, you might say, politician, Leigh Hunt, and managed to somehow almost compel him to publish some of his work, especially the long narrative poems of Endymion and Hyperion, critics were harsh. There's a famous line by the critic John Wilson Croker who concluded an article saying, "Back to your pots, Mr. Keats." That's because he had studied pharmacy. And though many readers had actually realized how wonderful the poetry was, Keats never achieved success. In his short life, spent between financial trouble, uneasy love affairs with Fanny Brawne from 1818 onwards, and of course disease. Only after his death did the great odes of 1819, the Ode on Melancholy, the one on a Grecian urn, to Autumn, to a Nightingale, and to Psyche, only after his death did those wonderful poems receive full appreciation as the masterpieces they are. Not to mention countless extraordinary shorter pieces, with a luxuriance and sensuousness of verse not seen since the days of Spenser, and a cult of beauty as the only force opposing death. Keats somehow heralded art for art's sake. Very famous quote from Endymion, Book 1. "A thing of beauty is a joy for ever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness, but still will keep a bower quiet for us, and a sleep full of sweet dreams in health and quiet breathing." A bower is a kind of a little house, kind of chaumière. There are also wonderful letters by Keats which were published in 1848 and later in 1878. They contain a definition of his famous concept of negative capability, that is, a capacity to suspend reason and write in spite of rational uncertainty. He says, "I am certain of nothing but the holiness of the heart's affection and the truth of imagination. What the imagination seizes as beauty must be truth, whether it existed before or not. For I have the same idea of all our passions as of love. They are all in their sublime, creative, of essential beauty." You see, all passions create beauty, and beauty is truth. Whether you're quite sure of that or not, it's not important. In order to write, you must have this negative capability, a sort of ability to reject the world all around you, the rational world, and to focus on those passions leading to beauty as the only thing opposing death. Again, I have to quote the Ode on a Grecian Urn. It's about the poet describing a Greek urn in a museum, perhaps, and in it there are little traits that he will identify as immortal beauty. Here, for instance, in this stanza, he describes the subjects, the marble men and maidens around this urn, sculpted. And he will definitely come to some sort of reconciliation with death just by contemplating the immortal nature of these shapes, because they are out of time, thanks to art. O Attic shape, fair attitude, with a breed of marble men and maidens overwrought, sculpted over with a sort of a ring, a breed of marble men and maidens, with forest branches and the trodden weed. Thou, silent form, dost tease us out of thought, as doth eternity, cold pastoral. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou say'st, beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. Okay, you may find this totally over the top, but this is Romanticism for you. This was new, and this was, oh, ever so profound and sincere. Other fine poets ought to be explored. George Crabbe, or for instance, John Clare, who is rather fashionable these days, but space is limited, and I must close this section by mentioning Thomas Moore, the supplier of many Irish melodies and their musical settings, and the author of an Oriental tale, Lala Ruch. And, oh yes, of course, the painting describing a totally romantic painting about a totally romantic scene, but which really happened in real life, the funeral of Shelley. It is true, Shelley drowned at sea on his boat, and his friend, Lord Byron, Trelawney, and other friends, they had to burn the body on the beach, and this is really what they did. They set up a funeral pyre, and the body, ever so romantically, was cremated on the beach. Romanticism, English Romanticism, sometimes seems so unreal. You think it's imagined, you think it's romantic, but it really happened. There is an element of fundamental truth about English Romanticism.